It is another Brother Buckeye broadcast. I'm your Brother Buckeye, Doug Daniels. Thanks for checking out the show today. Subscribe, like, comment below. Tonight's subject is a look at all 14 teams in the Big Ten, 18 next year, but 14 this year. And what I think the ceiling, floor, or first floor, penthouse, and basement projections are. I'll give you what I think they're going to do, and then worst case scenario, best case scenario. All right? Just kind of a little fun thing I thought of doing, because, when you go into the season, you think, well, the teams are going to do this, they're going to do that. And then we find out after game 1, 2, or 3, sometimes we know in week 1, trouble. Usually that's with Northwestern. They lose to somebody they're supposed to beat, and then it's like, Sometimes they turn it around. Last couple of years that they haven't. And speaking of Northwestern, that is where we're going to start. So I predict that they will finish last. They will finish last in the West, finish last overall, like they did last year. That's nothing against their new coach, Braun. It's just the reality. They had a lot of players bail, and they were already kind of thin. So I'm predicting a 2-10 season for the Wildcats. Now, the ceiling, and this would be a heck of a ceiling, would be 4 wins. The basement is basically going 0-12. Now, here are the games, the key games. These are the games where they could win, either being favored, probably only in one of those. That's the UTEP game. But where they're close in talent in some of the other ones, or where they could potentially create an upset. So their key games are Rutgers, UTEP, Duke, Howard, Nebraska, and Purdue. Now I have them beating UTEP and Howard, and then I have them losing all the rest of the games. They usually lose to Duke. They're going to lose all the Big Ten games. But if they're better than we think, and they could pull off a win versus Rutgers, along with UTEP and Howard, and then maybe Purdue has fallen way off and Nebraska doesn't improve as much as we think, maybe they could pull a 4-8 season off, which would probably earn Braun a Coach of the Year honor. I only slightly exaggerate. So my prediction is 2-10. I think there'll be UTEP and Howard, and I believe they will lose all the rest. Could they lose to Howard and UTEP and go 0-12? I guess it's possible. I don't think so. I think they're going to win one more than they did last year. At 13 is Indiana. It kind of pains me to look at Indiana as a bottom feeder again, when just in 2020, they were on the verge of the Big Ten championship game and would have been there had it not been for, changing the rules to favor Ohio State in the COVID year. A lot of that had to do with Michael Penix and that really good running back they had. I believe his name was Sharp. But anyway, Indiana's fallen way off. Now, I do believe they have reloaded, but I don't necessarily see them being better than Rutgers. That's why I've got Indiana at 13. Now, worst case scenario, Indiana could go 1-11. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to win at least 2 games. Maybe 3. I think the ceiling is 4 and 8. They go 4 and 8. That's it for Coach Allen. Now, their key matchup games are Indiana State, which I think they'll win, Louisville, Akron, Rutgers, Illinois, and Purdue. Those are the games I think they have a shot at winning. Now, if they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, if Indiana goes 6-6, then again, Tom Allen will be a candidate for Coach of the Year. Don't think it's going to happen. Wins versus Indiana State and Akron, with a shot at Rutgers and Louisville. Now, if Purdue and Illinois aren't as good as I think they're going to be, then maybe they win a couple of more. But right now, the only 2 games I see for sure are Indiana and Akron. And a Big Ten team loses to a MAC team probably 2, 3, 4 times every season. So 2-10 for Indiana, 1-11 if they don't pull off the win versus Indiana State or Akron, best case scenario, 4-8. I'm probably dumping on them a little bit more than I should, but I didn't want to put Rutgers. I didn't want to put Rutgers right at the bottom. I've got Rutgers at number 12, and I think they're going to go 4-8. I think Schiano's building something there. They'll never be Big Ten champions. I don't think they'll ever beat Ohio State, and probably not Penn State, but I think they've got enough juice to occasionally beat Maryland, Indiana, the Northwesterns of the world, so on and so forth. And, some of the non-conference teams. Like this year, they've got Temple and Wagner. Those could be wins. Northwestern's probably a win, so there's 3 there. They got Virginia Tech. I don't know how good Virginia Tech is this year. In fact, Virginia Tech plays 2 Big Ten teams. And then there's Indiana and Maryland. I think Rutgers could go 4-8, especially if they beat Northwestern, Temple, Wagner, and then at least one of Virginia Tech, Indiana, and Maryland. Don't think they're going to fare well anywhere else. 4-8's my prediction. 2-10 is the basement prediction, and that's if they lose to a Northwestern, a Temple, and a Virginia Tech. Then you're going to be hard-pressed to find that third win. I think the ceiling, though, here's the thing with the Rutgers. Let's say they win all those games. Northwestern, Temple, Virginia Tech, Wagner, Indiana, and Maryland. That's 6. No way they're going to do that. But if they could, win 5 of those, then you've got a 5-7 season. It's not a bowl season, but it's not bad. So that's why I've got Northwestern at the bottom, Indiana next. Rutgers, I think, has more juice than Indiana. Could be wrong. Purdue, my prediction, 4-8. Here are the key games, key matchup games. Fresno State, Virginia Tech. There's the other hokey game. Syracuse, Illinois, Nebraska, Northwestern, Indiana. These are teams that Purdue could win if they play well. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opponents. They're not going to win them all. And they're not going to win those other games. Probably. I'm predicting 4-8. 4-8. Brom's gone. The new guy's in. I think there's going to be an adjustment there. Ohio State's on the schedule. I think the basement for Purdue is 3-9. And that's if they lose to Fresno State, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. And if they trip up versus like a Northwestern or Indiana. So 3-9 is the basement. The ceiling is 5-7, which would be not bad for the first-year coach. Okay, Walters? But to get to 5-7 again, they're going to have to win most of the games that I've just mentioned, and maybe even pull off one of the other ones that I'm not even considering them up to task with. So Purdue is my number 11 team. Nebraska's next. I think Matt Rhule is going to improve them enough to where they could be a bowl team. I think their ceiling is 6-6. Go to a bowl, win that 7-6. Matt Rhule's probably your coach of the year. I actually think they're going to go 5-7. So I don't think their ceiling is much higher than my prediction of 5-7. And the rule of thumb in what I'm doing here, I started this off with the idea that whatever I predict, I think the basement is 2 games less than that or 2 games more than that. This is an exception. I'm predicting 5-7, but I don't think the high would be 7-5. I just don't think they can find 7 victories. I don't think they're going to turn it around that much. 6-6 is pretty good. And I don't think their basement is going to be that bad. 4-8. So this is a little bit different here. Their key matchups are Minnesota, Colorado, Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, basically the entire schedule. I think Minnesota is going to be very, very good. But then again, there's that Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin thing that's out there. You never know with those teams because there's such a rivalry because of the proximity and geography. I don't think they're going to beat Minnesota. I got Minnesota winning the West. In Colorado, with the whole prime time and, is Colorado going to lose to Nebraska in year one? Northern Illinois should be a win. Louisiana Tech is not a bad program, but it should be a win. Illinois, is Illinois going to be the Illinois of last year or the Illinois from a couple of years ago? Northwestern should be a win. Purdue, 50-50. Michigan State, probably not, but they could have. We don't know what's going to happen to Michigan State this year. They were terrible last year, great the year before. Maryland, I actually have Maryland doing very well this year, so I doubt that's a win. I have Wisconsin doing very well, so I doubt that's a win. Iowa, again, that's a rivalry game at the end of the season. That could be. So there's a lot of games here that are going to be, not necessarily 50-50, but somewhat evenly matched opponents. A play here, play there could be the difference. So my prediction for Nebraska is 5-7. The basement is 4-8. They're going to win 4 games. I think they're going to win 5. The ceiling is 6-6 in a bowl game. That's what I think of the Cornhuskers. Illinois, who had a great season last year, I think they're going to step back a little bit. I think they had a great quarterback last year. They had a great defense. The defense is not going to be as good this year, and unless they get great quarterback play. Now, they do have a couple of receivers I like, Isaiah Williams, and I do like their tight ends, but they were a very veteran team last year. That offensive line was really good, and the defensive line is still going to be good this year. I think a lot of things went the Illini way last year, even though they lost some games toward the end that they shouldn't have. But I'm predicting them to go 7-5. 7-5 would be a good year following up the really great year last year. I think 7-5 and a bowl win, 8-5 would be A-okay for my home state of Illinois. It's where I was born. And I don't think the basement is going to be worse than 6-6. I probably should say 5-7, but I really think they'll find 6 wins. Here are their matchup games: Toledo, Kansas, Florida Atlantic, Purdue, Nebraska, Maryland, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Iowa, Northwestern. Basically the entire schedule. So I think they can win 7. I don't think they're going to win any less than 6 and be a bowl team for a second year in a row. But I don't think their ceiling is that high. I think if they go 8-4 again, Brett Bielema might be coach of the year. So the ceiling is 8-4, basement 6-6. I'm going 7-5. I like the Illini. Michigan State, I just think they got to be better than last year, right? They have to be, and they're not probably not going to lose to Rutgers. They're not going to lose to Indiana. They're going to win the Richmond and Central Michigan games, which are in the non-conference. And then they need to pick off one of these other ones, like Nebraska. So I've got them going 6-6. That might be a little bit generous, but I think I've got them going 6-6, going to a bowl game. And I've got the basement for them only at 5-7. I just think there's too much talent there for them to have another bad season in a row. Plus, I'm kind of hoping that they beat Michigan. That game is at Michigan State this year. When they're in East Lansing, that's always a possibility. So my prediction: 6-6, basement 5-7, ceiling 7-5. So if they beat Central Michigan, Richmond, they're not going to beat Washington. Probably not. Rutgers, Nebraska, Indiana. That's 5. Then they've got to upset somebody. Is it going to be Maryland? Is it going to be Iowa? Is it going to be Minnesota? I don't think it'll be Penn State, Ohio State, and probably not Michigan. All right, let's go to Team 7. So this is the top 7 of the league. I've got Iowa there. I got them going 8-4 regular season. Might be a little too generous, but I think their offense is going to be better this year. Cade McNamara and Luke Lachey, I think they're going to be a better offense because that offense last year was miserable. Defense might be off a little bit, but their defense is always good. So 8-4 for me. I think the basement's 6-6 and another Big Ten bowl team. I think the ceiling is 9-3. From the basement to the ceiling, there's about a 3-game swath there. Key matchup games, almost their entire schedule. Utah State is not going to be pushover, should be a win. Iowa State, rivalry game. Western Michigan should be a win. But then again, these MAC teams at least 3 or 4 times beat the Big Ten team. And I think all 14 of them usually play one MAC team. Penn State, unlikely to be a win. Michigan State, that could be a win. Purdue should be a win. Wisconsin, I've got Wisconsin way up there this year. That's how much I believe in Luke Fickell. Minnesota, this could be the best Minnesota team yet. Northwestern should be a win. Rutgers should be a win. And then it's Illinois and Nebraska. If they can win those, then you've got a pretty good season. 9-3, probably not going to happen. 8-4 could happen. I guess 7-5 might be where they land, but I don't think the basement's going to be any worse than 6-6. Now, if they go 5-7, that's when you really have to say, Kirk, you did a pretty good job. Hayden Fry for all those years, Kirk Ferentz for all those years more, bringing some truly fresh blood. Kirk Ferentz has been there since, I believe, the early to mid-'80s. He was on that Hayden Fry staff for a long time. All right, Maryland. I think Maryland's going to be really good. Hopefully not too good. But I'm predicting 8-4. I believe they will, obviously be better than Indiana and Rutgers and Michigan State too, is where I've got them. 8-4. I think the basement is 7-5, meaning, unless the quarterback goes down, and he was hurt a couple of times last year, I don't see them going 7-5. I just don't, because 6 of those games are going to be against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. I see those as losses. But I see them beating Indiana and Rutgers. And their other key matchups, Charlotte should be a win. I think Virginia should be a win. I think they got a shot against Illinois. They should beat Nebraska. And they do play, 9-3 is the ceiling. 9-3 is the ceiling. I think they could win all their games except for the big 3. We'll see. Number 5 team is Wisconsin. I've got them going 10-2. I know that's crazy. That's how much I like Luke Fickell. Now, conversely, I think the basement for them is 8-4. 8-4 is a typical solid Wisconsin season. 10-2 is a Wisconsin season that could include a Big Ten championship appearance. The ceiling, 11-1. I think it's unlikely. But if some of these other teams in the West are not as good as I think some of them are going to be this year, like Minnesota, I think Illinois and Iowa and Nebraska are going to be the only team that I think is going to be really bad in the West is Northwestern. I think everybody else is going to be competitive. So an 11-1 is the ceiling. The key matchup games, Washington State should be a win. Purdue should be a win. Rutgers should be a win. Iowa's going to be a contest. Illinois is going to be a contest, but should be a win. I don't think they'll beat Ohio State, but if they do, watch out. Ohio State's playing in Madison. Ohio State lost to Purdue and Iowa a few years ago, not that long ago. They should beat Indiana, Nebraska, and then that Minnesota game, that Wisconsin-Minnesota game, I think is going to be the game for the Big Ten West and decide who's going to play in the Big Ten championship. So me 10-2, basement 8-4, ceiling 11-1. Speaking of Minnesota, I just think it is time for Minnesota to have that great season. It's the last time there's going to be a West, at least the West as we've known it. PJ Fleck is a good coach, a little weird. He is a Jim Tressel disciple. I've got Minnesota going 10-2 with Wisconsin. That's my prediction, with Minnesota beating Wisconsin. I don't think the basement is any worse than 9-3. The quarterback play should be good. Running backs, they've got some good running backs. Offensive line is always good. Receivers, the one kid that's back for his 7th year. Tight ends. Minnesota, this could be the year for them, like the best year that they've had since 1960 or something like that. Back when they were, occasionally a national championship contender. I think Minnesota plays Ohio State. I think that'll be one of their losses for sure. Their other matchups, Nebraska should be a win. North Carolina, you know what I'm saying? Louisiana, it's not LSU, but the Raging Cajuns are pretty good. They've got Michigan. That Little Brown Jug, I think, could be a fantastic contest. I would love Minnesota to beat Michigan. Iowa, Michigan State, it's a tough schedule. Illinois, Purdue. And probably this basement shouldn't be 9-3. It probably should be more like 7-5. Because if the wheels fall off and the Gophers fall in a hole, that was a burp. Yeah. Anyway, their basement could be 7-5. I'm saying it's 9-3. I just believe that much in this particular team. The ceiling, you're just like Wisconsin. The ceiling is 11-1, and that's if they upset Michigan and take care of everybody else except for Ohio State. Or they beat Ohio State and then take care of everybody but Michigan. 11-1 is the ceiling for Minnesota. Wisconsin, 11-1. I think Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, that Big Ten champion is, from the West anyway, will be one of Wisconsin and Minnesota. I think it's going to be one of those two. At number 3, Michigan. Yeah, I know they're favored to win. I just think Penn State is going to get the job done. And of course, I hope that Ohio State gets the job done. So I've got Michigan going 10-2. I think Ohio State and Penn State are going to be tough outs. I also think that Minnesota is going to be a tough out. And, Maryland's due to shock somebody at some point. And they have Michigan at home. So their key games are, they should walk over most everybody, but Nebraska's going to be tricky good this year. Minnesota for sure. Michigan State at East Lansing, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. I think they lose 2 of those. And I hope for sure one of them is versus Ohio State. The basement is 7-5. Now you go 7-5? Yeah, because if they lose early to somebody, and the whole Harbaugh, being gone thing, let's say J.J. McCarthy gets hurt or something like that, maybe Blake Corum goes down again, you could have one of those Brady Hoke, the wheels fall off the wagon seasons. Nebraska's going to be tricky. Minnesota, Michigan State, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. They've got 6 games that aren't going to be walkovers. Could they lose 3, 4, or 5 of those? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. That's why I'm saying 10-2. The ceiling for Michigan is national championship. It's going 12-0 in the Big Ten or 11-1, winning the Big Ten championship and getting into the playoffs. National championship is the ceiling for the Wolverines, while at the same time I'm saying the basement is 7-5. Let's go to number 2. Number 2 is Penn State. Again, I've got them going 10-2. Like Michigan, like Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So I believe the conference will be top heavy. 8-4 is the basement. Key games: West Virginia, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio State, Maryland, Michigan, and Michigan State. Everybody's very high on the Nittany Lions, but they do have a new quarterback, just like Ohio State and most of the Big Ten. But if they catch a cold, which they ought to do, if, like, for example, West Virginia's going to be up for that Penn State game. If West Virginia pulls the upset and there's vulnerability there, then some of these other teams are going to be chomping at the bit. Penn State's got to go to Ohio State. I do believe that Penn State hosts Michigan. Michigan State's always one of those teams that plays Penn State very well, Michigan State. And I think, again, Illinois and Iowa, are not garbage. So I think they're going to go 10-2. However, I think the basement, the floor for Penn State could be 8-4 because Dennis Franklin. But the ceiling for Penn State, Big Ten champion, potentially national championship. Ohio State, yeah, number one. I've got them going 12-0. Key matchups. I'm going to put Indiana here because it's game one. It's in Bloomington. If Indiana has any chance of having a season good enough to keep Tom Allen as coach, it's got to begin with Ohio State. Ohio State, new starting quarterback. It would be the shocker of all time. It'd be the biggest shocker since Louisiana Monroe, which is where I used to live, beat Alabama in Nick Saban's first year. Not going to happen, but I'm still counting it as a key game because it's game one. It's on the road. It's Big Ten. New quarterback. Da-da-da-da-da. But otherwise, Notre Dame, Maryland's got juice. Purdue, I believe we're on the road to Purdue. You know what happened there, back in 2017? Again, I kind of put that Purdue in the Indiana kind of bucket. Purdue's better than Indiana, and it's on the road. So I'm just saying it's a key game in lowercase. Penn State, obviously. Wisconsin, obviously. Michigan State, obviously. Minnesota, who I think is going to win the Big Ten West, and Michigan. So put it this way. Let's look at this. Ohio State has on their schedule the favorite to win the Big Ten. The two favorites to win the Big Ten West in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And they've got Penn State, who people are talking about. So Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Notre Dame. So I've got Ohio State going 12-0, winning the national championship. But here's the rub. I believe the basement, if there are a rash of injuries and the team starts kicking themselves because they lose an early one, let's say to Notre Dame, and then they lose to Penn State a few weeks later. If they got two losses midseason, with still Wisconsin, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Michigan on the schedule, this could be the first 3-loss season that Ohio State has had since 2011. They could go 15-0 and win the national championship, but they could also go 9-3. Because of that schedule, my friends, Michigan is a national championship contender. Penn State is a national championship contender. Notre Dame is always considered to be a playoff contender. I believe Wisconsin and Minnesota are going to be very, very good this year. 12-0, 9-3, national championship. Ryan Day being fired? If they lose to Michigan for a third year in a row, and that is the third loss of the season, and then what we have in December are decommitments from this number 2 class and a retirement from Larry Johnson, and it could lead to a coaching change. Now, I know that's crazy and that's bananas. Sometimes that's the difference between winning a national championship, a field goal in the game last year, Ohio State's national champion. If Marvin Harrison doesn't get his head taken off, national championship. If Cade Stover doesn't get taken out in the first half, national championship. This team should win the national championship. They are that talented. But Ohio State hasn't had a 3-loss season since 2011, and that was the 6 and 7 season, and Jim Tressel and the whole 9 yards. All I'm saying is, if I'm being honest, ceiling, national championship, 12-0 regular season, everything is what we love and want. Basement, when you've got Michigan, Minnesota, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State, a tricky Maryland team, and Notre Dame on the schedule, that's 7 games they've got to be up for and healthy. Okay, so what do you think? You let me know below. Who do you think is going to be the surprise team? Who do you think is going to be really disappointing? And, yeah. And we'll check those out, and I'll share some of your thoughts in the next show. This has been the Brother Buckeye Broadcast. I am Doug Daniels, and when I'm not doing this, I'm selling mattresses at Mattress Firm. I work at 2 places, the Diamond Plaza store at the corner of Morris and Stelzer, also in the Easton location. I go back and forth, but I'm mostly at the Diamond Plaza store. We've got some incredible sales coming up during the Labor Day. We've got the best prices on Tempur-Pedic all year long, deep discounts on Stearns & Foster and Beautyrest Blacks. We've got the Purple mattress. We've got Sleepy's and Sealy, Simmons, and Serta, all the S's. So come see me. Get a bed for yourself or your kids or your guest room. We have the best prices. This is the Buckeye Brother Broadcast. We'll see you again here in a couple of days. Go Bucks! I'm going to look you straight in the eye and say have a great night. Take care. So long.